Hi, I'm Sam from the Unity of Life and welcome back to my channel. Recently we've been looking at laws, and the laws that we've been talking about, apart from the Animal Welfare Act of 2006, have mainly been focused on puppies and kittens, or just dogs in general. So this law we're looking at today is actually the Riding Establishment Act of 1964 and 1970. Which does need to be updated, so let's get into it, shall we? So this act, it has two purposes. So the first purpose of this law, like any law, is to prevent the suffering of two animals. And the second part is to prevent injuries to riders, which they need to clarify on that a little bit, because sometimes injuries to riders is unavoidable, unfortunately. So you have to be over 18 to own your own stable. Unlike having to own an animal, you can be 60. You have to have a license to own a stable. So if you have to have a license to own a stable, then you should have to have a license to breed an animal. The horses you keep must be fit and healthy, like any animal that is in your care, and there must be a suitable diet, okay, because horses, they're very tricky. They have this very complicated gut system and it is very sensitive, so each horse has a very different diet, and it is really hard to change the diet of a horse sometimes, because with them being that sensitive, it can have some really bad consequences to the horse. But like I said, that all depends on the individual horse. I've worked in a stable before, and there was a chalkboard of the names of the horses and what they had, and each horse had something very different, because they all had different dietary requirements. And there was like 15 plus there, so it was hard to keep track of. So the horses you keep must be fit and healthy. We've said that right. So the horses' feet should be trimmed properly and shoed correctly, because it's very painful for the horse if their feet aren't trimmed properly. It's like you've had an ingrown toenail. And they need to be shod correctly as well if the horse requires shoes, because not every horse requires to have shoes. So you must have a suitable accommodation to keep the horses. That should just be common sense. For horses that are kept in fields or on fills, there must be some sort of shelter, water and a supplement food when they need it, e.g. in the winter, when there's not much grass available to them. You will provide your horses with the right food, water and bedding. Again, horses, they're all different individuals, so they all probably have different food needs, and they all need different bedding. They're not necessarily needing the same bedding, and that can go on depends on the breed as well as the individual horse. You will also make sure that your horse is exercised, groomed, rested and are visited. So go and see your horse, go and take it for a walk or a hike or whatever to exercise. Don't forget to groom your horse, and make sure that they get a time where they can rest. You should have an isolation stable, and this is the same for any kennel as well. Any operation that you have with animals, you should have an isolation department or room, or field or stable in this case, to keep contagious horses in and keep veterinary first aid kits on hand, because that's very important. If a horse is going to cut or graze, then you might be able to sort it with a first aid kit rather than having to get the vet out. It will cost you a lot of money. So the name of the holder and the license should be displayed with a contact number and an address. Alongside should be displayed fire instructions on how to keep the horses and the people who will use the stable safe. You want storage facilities to be provided, e.g. tack rooms, and feed rooms, if that would be nice. And if you've got a stable, you might consider even having a toilet area for the riders and the people who look after the horses. Any horse that is found to be ill must not work until the vet has told you that your horse is fit enough to work. No horse should be let out for hire or riding or instructions to anybody under 16. Anybody under 16 must be supervised by somebody who is 16 and over. Because horses can be dangerous, let's not forget that. The owner of the stable should not leave somebody under 16 in charge of it. Oops. I say oops. No, I was about 16, 17 when I worked in the stable, so that's okay. Anyway, the owner must be insured. The owner of the stable should have all their horses 3 years and under registered, which shall be available for any inspection authorities. So again, it'll probably be somebody from your local council, RSPCA, those types of people. So if you want to hire out your horse, what are the regulations that you need to be aware of? Because some people do hire out their horses and have like loans and stuff because they may not have the time to be able to look after the horse. So somebody will pay you to look after your horse and have that pleasure. The requirement of the riding establishment to hold a licence. Under the Riding Establishment Act of 1964, where the person wishes to keep a riding establishment, he or she or they must obtain a licence from their local authority. So what is a riding establishment? Well, that should be easy. It's pretty much any stables or a business which keeps horses either for letting out, hire, riding them, which provides riding lessons for payment, which is most stables, to be fair. So do the regulations apply to all types of horses? So the answer to that is yes. Any type of horse, doesn't matter if it's male, female, old, young. That even covers donkeys and mules as well. Are there any exemptions to the requirement to hold a licence? There is no requirements to hold a licence where horses are kept solely for police purposes, or by Zoological Society of London, or kept by a university to instruct students studying an approved course leading to a degree in veterinary science. A licence is also not required where the horses are kept on land occupied or under the management of the Secretary of State of Defence. Can a licence be granted to anybody? No. A licence cannot be granted if a person is disqualified from keeping a riding establishment, a pet shop, or an animal boarding establishment, or just owning an animal, or disqualified from owning, keeping, dealing in, having custody of transporting animals under the age of 18. False information was given when applying for a licence. Please don't be given, saying your name is Mickey Mouse or something ridiculous like that. You need to have the correct information on there so people know who to contact and who they're dealing with, especially when things go wrong. Where applying for a licence knowingly or recklessly provides false information or makes a false statement, they commit a criminal offence and may be fined or even imprisoned. So any licence granted may also be cancelled and the person disqualified from keeping a riding establishment for such time as the court see fit. If you're imprisoned, I think, then you won't be allowed to have any sort of breeding establishment or stable. So let's have a look at what matters the local authority take into account when they decide whether or not to grant you a licence for a riding establishment. So a local authority, like we've said, is mainly going to be your local council. They're required to obtain and consider a vet's report before they can grant a licence. Okay, the vet must inspect the relevant premises not more than 12 months before the application or since the date of the application. And I think leaving it for about 12 months is a bit it's not great because a lot can happen and change in a period of time, so I think it should be shortened to at least within a month. When deciding whether to grant a licence, the local authority will take into account the suitability of the applicant or his manager and the suitability of the accommodation and pasture. So pastures are, for non-horsey people, are pretty much just like a field. So the local authority will want to ensure that there's adequate provisions relating to the health, welfare and exercises of the horses. Okay, which is it's common sense, that you take precautions against spread of the disease and to guard against a fire. It's what you would do in any other business that hasn't got anything to do with animals. So you're gonna do it for animals as well. Provisional licenses sounds like you're learning how to drive. Don't forget that in the law that I'm talking about is also in the UK. If the local authority is not satisfied that a permanent licence should be granted, it can grant a provisional licence for 3 months. Okay. A person is forbidden from keeping a riding establishment under a provisional licence for more than 6 months, if any 1 year. Conditions of a licence. These are always very important and people tend to ignore them. Every licence is subjected to conditions, even if these are not expertly set out the licence itself. So basically the conditions are: any horses found on inspection to require veterinary attention will not be used until it's been told that it is fit enough to be used. Provisions is made for proper supervision of riders who require it, so anybody who is under the age of 16 or anybody who has never rode a horse before in their lives, because riding a horse is complicated. The business will not be left in charge of a person under the age of 16. Proper insurance will be held, like in anything, and a register of horses aged 3 and under will be kept, which I think you should have a register of all the horses that you keep in your premises, regardless of their age, so you know what horses you've got and who you're dealing with. So your local authority may decide that they're going to give you all some additional conditions, and for example, this could be that they require an applicant to hold an assistance instructor's certificate or an instructor's certificate of fellowship issued by the British Horse Society or the Fellow Institutes of the Horse. So if you breach any of these conditions, then it's obviously a criminal offence, and again you'll be fined or you'll be imprisoned, and your licence actually can be cancelled, and the holder of that licence can also be disqualified from holding a licence, and you can, unfortunately, you can appeal this. So how long does a licence last? So any licence that's granted for a riding establishment, unless it's cancelled, it needs to be reviewed every year. Okay, so every year you have to apply for a new one, which should be the case of most, if not all animals. If the holder of a licence dies, because it does happen, we do die, we're not immortal, we're not gods or anything like that, or vampires or werewolves or whatever, the licence passed to their personal representatives for up to 12 months. So you've got to pass that on to somebody. So when you're setting up this sort of business, it does need to be, you will have inspections by a vet and somebody from your local authority. And the animal welfare and safety, that's going to be taken into consideration. So in addition to the requirements to hold a licence, there are a number of criminal offences relating to a riding establishment. Well, one of these offences is committed, the court can fine or imprison you, and again cancel your licence. Okay, so it's an offence to hire out a horse or use a horse for the purpose of providing riding lessons in return for payment or for demonstrating riding, if the horse is in such a condition that riding is likely to cause the horse suffering. So that's only an offence if the horse is ill and the vet's told you that the horse is not fit enough for anybody to ride, and you still hire the horse out for it to be ride. You can't ride a horse if it's less than 3 years old, and it should be common sense that you shouldn't be riding any mare that is in form or has foaled within the last 3 months, because they need time to recover. So fail to provide a suitable care for sick or injured horses kept for the purpose of hiring out, for the purpose of providing riding lessons in return for payments or demonstration riding. So, the Animal Welfare Act of 2006 does come into that. So if you break any of the acts in the anything in the Animal Welfare Act of 2006, you can still be fined under this law, as well as maybe that one as well. So it is also an offence to supply defective equipment when you're hiring out a horse. Anybody who has ever owned a horse before in their entire lives will know that riding equipment has to be top notch, because you don't want your stirrups to break and you to fall off the horse, or the girth not to be tightened up properly and you slip on the saddle. Equipment is there for your protection as the rider more than it is for the horse, and it is expensive, and so for it to last longer you want to be able to look after it, so you really should be doing regular checks when you're cleaning your equipment, and that's even if you own a horse and you're not hiring it out. That's always really important to do so as well. So please share this video. I hope you've learned something. Don't forget to subscribe by clicking on my face down here. The playlist of laws will be here, and then there'll be another video up here potentially, and I will see you next time. Please don't forget to put on your notifications if you are subscribed. Going to subscribe, and don't forget to like and comment, and I'll see you next time. Bye.